me talk and see some stuff. I don't know. I'm just really grateful. So thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to go through some of my work. And, you know, you could put some questions in the chat and then we'll go over stuff if you have any questions or comments. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end where I can show you a sneak peek of a graphic novel I've started. I've been showing some process shots in my Instagram actually since last summer and on my Facebook page and stuff, but nothing to where you can really see it in sequence. So I was going to share, I guess, maybe the first like 13 pages just only with this group. So aside from my close friends and family, nobody's seen it. So, but let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. And I got a little presentation I put together. So, all right, so this is, ever since I was a kid, I always loved drawing monsters, and I have this presentation broke up into kind of like chapters. And I do realistic stuff. You know, I practiced and did like normal art stuff when I took art classes, but my favorite stuff to draw is actually like monsters and creatures and whatnot. This is what I consider to be my first good drawing that I did when I was a junior in college. I mean, I've drawn my whole life since I was 4, but I remember finishing this in my sketchbook. I was hanging out at my buddy's house in the suburbs at a barbecue and trying to capture like the vibe of just hanging out with my friends. But when I finished this, and even though it's not the greatest drawing I ever did, I remember thinking, I definitely want to take cartooning more seriously and do this for the rest of my life. And then I kind of did a series of these kinds of drawings. They were done with like mixed media, like pen and ink, colored pencils, markers. But I was kind of like on a kick for a while doing these types of drawings, you know, taking like animals and kind of comparing them. This is an envelope I drew in the hospital the night my mother passed away. I mean, I just drew the black and white part, but I didn't have anything to draw on, but I just needed to kind of put those feelings somewhere. So I got this from the nurse's station and it was an envelope that I drew. And this is just some sketchbook work. I use the Moleskine sketchbooks a lot and just kind of fill them up. I don't know if you can see behind me or not, but back here is all my sketchbooks since I was 18 years old. And there's probably, I lost track count of, you know, probably about 100 or 80 something, I don't know. But I'm constantly working in sketchbooks. It's like a little art gym. And here's more of kind of the same stuff. This is done 2003, I think. Maybe 2005. I'm a big Tom Waits fan, as you can see by this poster behind me. And I even got, I sent him some artwork when back in '97. And I got, on Father's Day, I sent him some artwork, talked about how he was an influence on me. And we were pen pals for a minute. He even sent me a jar of spaghetti sauce on Christmas one year with a hand-drawn label. But it was pretty neat. That's when, like, you know, the internet was new and you could kind of get people's addresses. And, you know, now this is also before all those anti-records records came out. So I think his fan base didn't have such a giant group of young people. But it seems like a really cool guy. This was some mail art for my wife. She loves Halloween. So this is drawing on an envelope. But instead of sending her like flowers and stuff, I would send her like mail art, either to her home or her work when we first started dating. That was my move with most girls in my life. So, I like old music. I mean, I like all kinds of music, but so you'll see a lot of music stuff in my work. There's a quote from my buddy Anthony Pedro, who moved to Portland years ago, but he was just a real hilarious guy. He's a painter I used to go fishing with a lot. This was a giant banner made for New Orleans yard art show shortly after Katrina, where they were putting art in people's yards. And this was like a 5-foot by 3-foot banner on vinyl that was posted in someone's yard down there. I do love New Orleans. I love New Orleans music, New Orleans culture, New Orleans food. I just visited last Easter, actually by myself, to do some research in the Mardi Gras Indians and the Backstreet Culture Museum. So here's some music-inspired art. kind of weaves into different stuff. Uh, this is a CD cover that I did a couple years back. I'm part of this group of musicians. I was just like a fan, and then they started inviting me to sing on some of their albums, which, you know, it sounds like kind of like a gut shot dog, but it's fun. So, but this is a cover I did for one of their Christmas CDs. Oh, something's going wrong here. This is the back cover where all the songs were listed. Some more Tom Waits. This was actually mail art I sent to him at one point. And this was a Christmas card I sent to him. Can you all see the full screen? Can everybody see the full screen, or is it just?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because I see like what's names in front of it, like people's, you know, the boxes. All right, good. Oh, there's one of the postcards I got from Tom Waits one year, where he said, "This is me," and he pointed an arrow to a monkey's butt. There's that spaghetti sauce. I used to do some flyers for my buddy who DJ, like just Tom Waits music. A couple like-minded friends in the city, kind of into the same stuff. Screamin' Jay Hawkins portrait. This was done for, I did an art show a few years back called Norris Street Mixtape. I grew up on Norris Street, and I did a lot of pictures about music or about musical lyrics or about musicians. And I don't know if anybody knows or remembers Nate Wiley. This guy was a hero of mine. And I was actually honored I got to carry his casket when he passed away, but he was a huge influence on my life. Very blue collar. He fought in World War II and then went to music school on the GI Bill. And I was very fortunate, say the last, I don't know, 10 to 12 years of his life. I was able to kind of get close to him. He was a good friend of mine. My friends and I actually made a documentary on him and his band at Bob and Barbara's. And he was just a huge presence and a big influence on me. At 84 years old, he was still practicing saxophone every day, sitting at the edge of his bed in his pajamas and playing along with his records. And he never stopped practicing as long as he lived. But he, real great guy, big hero of mine. This was a Christmas ornament I designed for the club's Christmas party the year after. Back when Ortlieb's Jazz House actually had jazz, I did some flyers for them. Two of my heroes, Louis Armstrong and Charlie Chaplin. And I just loved that these guys were, you know, had really hard childhoods, but wanted to make something good out of life for other people and spread that along. And these are two more people that have influenced me greatly after reading their autobiographies and just listening to their music and watching their films over the course of my life. Actually, but that one right here, this was a gift for, I left it backstage for Tony Bennett, and I saw him in 2010 at the Mann Music Center. Big Johnny Cash fan. This was part of that Norris Street mixtape. Billie Holiday. Thelonious Monk is probably my favorite musician of all time. I just love that he has that way of playing to where one hand is playing so delicately and kind of has that tinkling piano, and the other hand sounds like he has like fingers are just made of hammers and hitting that sour percussion. There's something about his music that speaks to me. I played a lot when I draw. And I didn't find out until I was probably in my 30s that he was a schizophrenic. And the documentary that Clint Eastwood had produced and put out, his family actually said it out loud. But I think that's probably where that sound that's unique to him comes from. Some stuff I would draw. Back in like the late 90s, I would do a lot of drawing on site at jazz clubs. And I have a couple sketchbooks full of like just jazz musicians like this Ahmed at Zanzibar Blue. I forget what this, now it's called Tavern on Broad. It's like a downstairs bar. And this was a cover of Atlantic City Weekly a few years back. Mulgrew Miller. So you'll see that these lines are very kind of small and choppy. I work a couple different ways. When I was younger, I worked mostly with pen. And as I got older, I started to use more brush pen work. And just use pen lines for my smaller details that I couldn't make with a brush. It's a little more efficient, but you get like a sweeping line. It's a different feeling. And this actually uses digital colors on this one, whereas a lot of my stuff uses markers. So I don't work any one way. Been using Photoshop since version 2 came out. So I'm just kind of stuck with that program for colors. This was another Atlantic City Weekly cover. Jay-Z and Kanye West did a joint show there at the Borgata. This was a cover of a CD or album I did for a producer named Aaron Levinson. I don't know if he still lives in Fishtown. I think he's in Kensington now, but he was running a label called Range Records out in Ardmore. And I actually got to meet Lonnie Johnson's family through the release of this album, which was pretty great. Lonnie Johnson's a blues musician who's played all around, but also I believe he's from Philadelphia, and he used to play with Eddie Lang and also Louis Armstrong and stuff. Aaron also produced this album. It's like gypsy jazz music. So this is the front and back cover of a group from somewhere in the Midwest. They're called Harmonious Whale. I think they're from Wisconsin. This was the original drawing for this album. That the concept got scrapped, but it was based on some of the songs. And this was just a sketchbook piece. I do a lot of mail art for people. I don't know what it is. I've been doing it since I was probably a freshman in college. My college roommate's a big influence on me. A guy named Jason Farnsworth out of Easton, who is also an art teacher. We both wound up becoming art teachers, even though we were in school for 2 different things. But he's a great teacher, and I just watched him do a lot of innovative stuff. And it took me from wanting to be a guy who draws superheroes immediately to somebody who's studying really old-timey cartoons and something that, and even not just the old-timey stuff, but stuff from the 60s too. So like, you know, the underground cartoonists. And I kind of changed my way of making art just in the 1 year that I stayed at Kutztown with this guy, Jason. But definitely mail art was the thing I stole from him. I'm into old blues music too, like Taj Mahal. This is a Taj Mahal song. More sketchbook work. This piece is actually hanging in Salome's restaurant. They bought it from that Nara Street mixtape show I did at Masthead a few years back. But these guys went to North Catholic like I did. There is a group called the American Dream, and they sing just as they're only known, I think, for this one really weird, funny, almost country hillbilly song. This was from that show as well. Big fan of Nina Simone, but I also like the Animals version of this song. My dad has this one. My wife's family is somehow captivated by this song. It's like if this song comes on, they all stop what they're doing and sing it, from like the dad down to the youngest kid. It's called Lady by the Little River Band. I don't know if y'all remember Pee Wee Martini. I don't know if this dog is still alive, but he was the world's ugliest dog for a while. And my friend had owned Amble Gallery, and the Philadelphia Cartoonist Society, who I'm co-founder. This group has been around since '97. We did their first show, and it was all based on this dog. It was a Pee Wee Martini art show. It was their first show. This is part of an art show I did right when I was about to propose to my wife in 2010. It was called Dirt Balls in Love. We're both from Fishtown. Which, dirt balls are a colloquialism, like the worst thing you could have called somebody from Fishtown when I was a kid. So I kind of jokingly named the show that. But it's a Billy Bragg song. You see, the Palmer Cemetery fence is what's behind these two skeletons. These are some silkscreen gig posters I did for the Gene Ween Band. I don't know if you're familiar with Ween. They're like a local rock group who plays a lot of weird, silly stuff, but they're amazing. And then I did, when they did a reunion, I did another poster for them. There's some more gig posters. Believe it or not, neither one of these festivals happened. They were a part of Electric Factory, and I can't remember what the reason was, but for some reason, both of the festivals wound up not happening. But I was happy to work with Aaron Levinson, was kind of behind both of these, and Max, who is pictured there on the right. He's a buddy of mine, a local hip hop artist. He was in the group called the Goats when I was in college, like a really progressive hip hop group. I don't know if you're familiar with the Goats or not, but Black Landlord is like he leads it as he raps, but his entire band plays like 70s and 60s like soul and funk. It's really great music. And here's some stuff inspired by my wife. That's her right there. That's me when I was a few pounds skinnier, less of a beard. This is some of the mail art I sent her that was inspired by a German artist named Heinrich Clay, who did a lot of like turn of the century kind of editorial cartoons, real sketchy and scratchy, but I kind of reference that here. Here's a Valentine's gift I made for her. It's like poster size. And these were for, they're kind of like the same concept, just two different takes on it. So like a Day of the Dead show I did this for. And then Frankenstein and his wife, his bride. And here are some of our holiday cards, the first few years we got together. So these are her sons and our dog who passed away, sadly, Zoe. But I made myself the Yeti in these drawings. And this is a drawing of her eyes I did when we first started dating. Some more mail art. Fronts and backs of envelopes. And this is a book I made from that art show in 2010. That was a tribute to her. So here are some of the works from there. I like to use colored ink sometimes. And I did it a lot at this time. I don't know, it's because I was so swept up in romance. I was like kind of really into doing stuff in color. I don't know if you recognize the background on this. It's at the corner of Almond and York Streets. There's like these little Buddhas that sit on top. They're made out of cement on top of a fence. But I go around and take a lot of photos wherever I am, not just in Philly or Fishtown, but I mean every place I visit and go to. And I often use these photos for reference, either as backgrounds or just little pieces of them in drawings. I think I was listening to both Hoagy Carmichael and Big Maybelle when I made this one. And I guess once again, a little Tom Waits inspiration. He sings about diners and stuff a lot. And here's some portraits I did. A lot of these were for a magazine company I worked for from 2008 to 2011. So that's the Apollo 5 astronauts, Charles Dickens. A lot of these were about how people kind of died unusual deaths. They were like a medical condition article, and it was like a series. There's Chopin. So I used the same kind of, sepia tone, but then the cross hatching in the background. So they all had a certain look. President Taft, I think he was now I don't know. They always called him our fattest president, but I don't know now. Maybe another guy is. Steve Allen, I was George Washington before him, Cleopatra. And sometimes I just draw things I like. I don't know why, but I'm like enamored by the idea of like migrant workers during the Depression, like hobos and stuff. So there's certain things I've worked that into my stuff a lot. But this is Lee Marvin from a film called The Emperor of the North Pole, where he fought Ernest Borgnine, who was had a notorious reputation for killing hobos who tried to hop his train. It's like a crazy 70s movie. Sometimes they do portraits for hire, pet portraits. This was a gift for a guy I used to work with. This is from my sister's friend, little baby portraits. This little guy's about 14 right now. This was a teacher I worked with at North Catholic, the other art teacher, Shannon Gallagher. She's Roman's art teacher now. This was done on site during a lecture when Harvey Pekar was speaking at the Free Library. I actually got him to sign it, and then I gave it to my friend who was a big fan, and my friend Chris Patchell, also a cancer survivor. So this meant a lot to him. I gave it to him as a gift. One of my heroes is Randall Tex Cobb, and if not for anything else, just this fight alone where he lost 15 out of 15 rounds, but he wouldn't drop. And I actually met him at Temple and became friends with him for years. Every now and again, I'll get a phone call or something. He's over living in Marysville, Washington now. But he's in movies and stuff too. This was the initial comic I wrote about him. But he's invited me to some events and book releases. The guy is like a really, really interesting guy. There's a book by Larry Platt, who used to write for Philadelphia Magazine. The book's called New Jack Jocks. And he wrote an article for GQ Magazine years ago, which made me a big fan of Tex because he really lost everything in life, but he just was still trying to, number one, be stubborn about his cause, but also would not cheapen himself or the sport of boxing because it was very holy to him. And I just like that he just kept fighting every day, despite having nothing. Some more Atlantic City weekly work. I did like that show Boardwalk Empire, so it was nice to be able to do something like this. My nephew who passed away December of 2018. This was a Ron Hextall drawing I did for him. Ron Hextall was his hero. And here's some t-shirts and poster designs. I used to do a lot of this stuff, but the market became oversaturated. This kind of like fan art for T Fury and Ripped Apparel and stuff. But the whole market has changed to where it's really not worth my while anymore. But Doctor Who I had no idea really what it was about until I started studying it. And he kind of kept me in business for a few years. But I try to take things, a different approach instead of just redoing what other people do. I like to take like classic pieces of art and then kind of do a mashup with something in pop culture or old toys, things that inspire me. Old comic book ads. So these are all like Doctor Who tribute stuff. This is a mashup of the Mighty Ducks and Friday 13th. And these are all like pop art things I've done. Star Wars. This guy in the bottom corner is his name's Chris Cummins. He's a good friend of mine. We went to film school together and at Temple, and he runs a website and like online accounts, a thing called Sci-Fi Explosion. Puts on these great Friday night shows, and he goes out and speaks too. He also runs Nerd Night Philly, but he's really, really like smart and good-hearted nerd. I'm really into like geek culture. I love this guy, but it's neat that he's wearing my one shirt. This was probably the biggest selling shirt I had, a little Star Wars and Doctor Who thing. But it was nice to have that when he was speaking somewhere, he was actually wearing it. A lot of times you get out of, you dodge a bullet by not getting sued by matching up two pieces of pop culture, and you call it, you say it's parody, you know what I mean, or fair use or whatever. Did love the TV show Cheers. I watch that a lot still on Netflix.
Hey, Jeff, we have a few comments here. Just wanted to share with you.
Sure.
So we have a few comments, a few questions. Chris said he's learning a lot, very encouraging.
Thank you.
Have A Man in a Train, my dad's favorite, from Gina.
Mm-hmm.
And then a question from Chris. This is great. Have you ever seen the kids' book, Who Needs Donuts?
Yes, I have the cover of it hanging in my classroom. I love that book. Yeah. I got that as a gift years ago from another Cartoonist Society member. And I mean, the detail in that is unbelievable. And I just love how everything's wiggly and all the cross hatching and stuff. It's amazing.
And then we have something from Kelly B. It said, hey, Jeffro, great talk and cool work. I'm wondering if you've encountered the graphic novel, My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris.
No, but I would definitely look it up.
And if so, whether you have thoughts about it. So we can save the chat and I'll share that with him, and maybe that's something cool,
I appreciate that. I'll definitely look into it. I need some new stuff. I've been doing some research for my comic I'm working on, and I need some new inspiration.
Awesome.
I've been studying up on Jack Kirby and Mobius during quarantine, but I've been studying those guys my whole life.
And then Gina says, thank you for that you're very talented, and she's thanking you for sharing your work. And then we have somebody else that after you're finished your slideshow, they would really love to see the Billie Holiday thing again.
Okay, sure. I don't know if y'all are familiar with a TV show called The Wire, but for the longest time, I mean, it's still my favorite TV show of all time. And I almost feel like it's like, it's one of my favorite pieces of American art. And being a teacher and in the city, I've just seen how Sorry about that. A lot of, it just covers a lot of issues that we're facing every day as a society. And it shows a lot of the gray area, which I think doesn't come up in a lot of conversations. So anyways, this was a tribute to Omar. For a little while, I was making money doing some Walking Dead stuff. The lady who plays Michonne, I did find out that she had this picture on her phone when she was in Philly. She met a couple friends of mine, which I was flattered. Arrested Development, Iron Giant, and Futurama. Sometimes I never want to do stuff where I'm not drawing something I like. So, you know, I'm always trying to pay tribute to things that I'm doing, even if I'm trying to make money doing it. So this one was, you know, Calvin and Hobbes tribute, of course. This one I made for my nephew. It was a poster. He was really into the Lego movie for a while when he was young. Skeletor. This one I caught some flack for when the shirt went up online at T-Fury because it was also right around the time Michael Vick was in the news a lot for dog fighting, which really I didn't really endorse that in any way, but some people interpret it that way. Mashup of Ninja Turtles and Gremlins, two things I love. Movie Rushmore, using Mount Rushmore. So these are still all t-shirts. I was also part of a tribute show for Guillermo del Toro in LA. It was a group show. So I sent over some Pacific Rim stuff. This was a kind of a joint one. The concept was done by a friend of mine, Mike, and it was like a KFC / Breaking Bad parody. This was just a poster I made of Lovecraft fighting Edgar Allan Poe. Hunter S. Thompson. This is one I made for a website a few years back called My Main Man Pat that they do exclusively just hip hop shirts. So if you like the Roots, Questlove. This is a t-shirt for anybody that's ever been down to Jersey Shore. I assume you get this joke. But it's also a tribute to Big Daddy Roth, a cartoonist I really liked as a kid and still study his work. He does all those hot rod cartoons like Rat Fink and stuff. But there's on my Redbubble and everything. One day I hope to see one of these pillows sitting in somebody's shore house. And this was actually from a talk I gave at Philly Nerd Night a few years back that my buddy Chris ran. But I try to put as many geek references in here with Ben Franklin, the original geek. Here's some stuff. I'm born and raised Fishtown, which is right about where the port side is. So I've designed a lot of Fishtown shirts over the years, all different kinds. And when we were kids, you know, that was our basketball court pretty much. And Fishtown was named after the shad fisheries that used to be along the river there, even though you will never catch a shad this far south in the Delaware anymore. But I did 2 books, but they were initially in the local free paper called The Spirit, which doesn't exist anymore. But my cousins ran it, and we used to do these sketches of Fishtown. Initially, I started it with my cousin, but he kind of dropped out of the project. But they were kind of like little vignettes. Some of them were people's memories. It was kind of like a neighborhood project. They shared photos, they shared memories. I would do some research, and it was kind of give and take through the neighborhood. But I did this for about 5 years and came out with like probably like 106 issues. Just as the neighborhood was changing. It was really a reaction to the early days of gentrification. Because at first I was like kind of furious that we're being gentrified, and then it became a more open project to where a lot of new people and new businesses were also taking part in it. And my vision of the neighborhood changed, and I became I don't know, I started to get a wider scope of what was going on. Here's a mural I did, let me see, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, right at Frankfurt and Dauphin, cat a corner from the Philadelphia Credit Union, the Federal Credit Union. But Brad Carney, the guy standing next to me, he actually did the application, all I did was kind of paper and kind of piece it together in the computer, almost like color forms. This covers, and it was all about the arts in Kensington area. But I have a brilliant artist. What is it? And old stuff. I'm about to maybe cram in here. Even the first, but he was, and at a time in my life when I was very angry, I graduated college, and I was kind of angry that somebody didn't hand me a good young angry man. But here there, and it's actually how he started teaching. But he was my first book was a tribute to those kids. All they wanted to do was lay for them, coloring or drawing projects were donations to one of their art shows. In Philly, there's a lot of other groups like there's the Philly Comics Jam. I've seen a few different groups like this pop up since, but there's another one, Dirty Diamonds. It's all female artists who put out anthologies. But we did a lot of charity work, a lot of together. We got each other jobs as well. 10th anniversary show back down in South Philly. We used to run a Pictionary night. Yeah, we would take our sketchbooks on the trains and just ride back and forth on the L. We called it Hobo Day, kind of a joke, but we would sit and sketch on the L as a group. And here are some of our anthologies. I'm sorry that the picture on the left is blurry. I didn't realize that when I put it in here. But that's our first and second anthology book. Each one had like 20-something artists in it. Here's our third one. As we get older, I mean, I'm a grandfather now. I have 2 grandkids, and we don't get together as much as we used to. We used to get together every week. And it was like once a month, and now it's a couple times a year, sadly. But it's nice to have a lot of like-minded friends who you could bounce your ideas off of and kind of springboard each other into doing creative things. And I'm also part of another group that started out in New York called Meat House, and that's more like underground comics vibe. This was a comic I was doing years ago, kind of based on Fishtown, but long before, gentrification was even spoken. This was a 2-page spread I did in Swindle magazine that's owned by Shepard Fairey. I talked earlier about my cousin Sean, who was a local graffiti artist, sign painter. I mean, if you've ever seen It Was All a Dream mural at 11th and Spring Garden, that was his. He had passed away 3 years ago, brain cancer. He was the first kid I ever really taught how to draw, but he passed what I do way beyond anything. I mean, biggest I draw is like poster size. He used to work on whole walls and stuff, and he did it all freehand. He did all the work for Four Corners, places like Ortlieb's and Morgan's Pier, Union Transfer. He did all that paint on the roof, all their signage. But they asked him to do this 2-page spread, and it would have been a great leg up for him. And he said, no, I'd rather give it to my cousin, which was really nice of him. And I jumped at the chance when I found out he really didn't want to do it. But this is just about kind of excavation into some of my darker thoughts, and then kind of how darker thoughts lead into more positive things in life. A few years back also as part of an anthology that is gigantic. Right here. So this page, it's only half the page, but it's part of this book. And it's a tribute to Winsor McKay, who did Little Nemo and Slumberland, who's one of my favorite artists and probably my favorite comic of all time. And it was back in like the early 20th century, kind of like the birth of the art form. So this was a Winsor McKay tribute. Some more comic stuff. We did a cartoonist. I did a Watchmen IMAX like poster display on King of Prussia when that movie came out. This was some submissions to Mad Magazine. I've still, I never got in there, but in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, I was submitting a lot of work to Mad Magazine. This is a hobo zombie drawing I did. A story I was about a Depression era kind of voodoo zombie, but was actually made into a toy by my friend Sam Heimer, who runs HH Toys. He makes these vinyl figures, which I thought that was really, really cool. I was able to do that. But that was my horror comic, my Triad horror comics. It was also kind of inspired by that Emperor of North Pole. And here are just because some various things I've done for art shows. On the left side, that's called skating. Those are real. I had a cow skull somebody found in the desert and gave to me, but I could not get flies to stop coming after it. So I had the woodshop teacher at North Catholic saw the horns off, and I turned it into a skateboard sculpture for Exit Philadelphia. It was a charity thing. And then the mandrill face is another skateboard charity piece. But that, I'm also a big fan of the band Mandrill, 70s funk band. Pretty amazing. It's like my summer music. And these are some bottles I've done for a World's Fair trade show. I draw a lot on sticker paper, like labels. I do a lot of sticker art, so I was using it as actual labels here. Sometimes I would do them for, this one was done for the Library Company of Philadelphia. So comment on different local things. These are just various pieces I've done for art shows. Deep Sea Diver, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but that's a character I've been using for years and years, and I really identify with it for some reason. This was a sketchbook piece I colored digitally. More colored ink. My father did 27 years on the fire department. A few years back at Lost Bar, Atlanta's over at Frankfurt and Haggard, I did an all firefighter art show based on, a lot of them were based on the photos of George Hausman. George Hausman was a firefighter who was in charge of taking photos through the 70s and 80s for the Philadelphia Fire Department. And when he was still alive, he let me dig into his photos and scan a bunch of them. That's actually my great grandfather on the right, who was on the fire department back in, early part of the 20th century. And that's it for this presentation. Can we take a few questions? And I do have something else I want to show you all, but that'll be, the last few minutes.
Yeah, we'll take any, if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Jeff. And I did put something in the chat, Jeff, earlier, just to let people know that after the presentation, if they want to stick around, you'll show us some of the stuff you're working on.
Yeah, I have a sneak peek that I've never showed anybody in sequence, but I'm working on a graphic novel since last summer, actually. And I probably have about 30 or more pages started, but I was going to give a little sneak peek of the first, say, like 13 or so pages.
Cool.
I think that's awesome. We have 2 comments and a question.
Okay.
We have a comment that says, Randall Tex Cobb, remember him well, camera carrying, been my staple for city paintings for years, and that was from Chris. And then Chris also wanted to know where he could follow your work. I put a link to your Facebook page, but if there's any other places people can follow you.
Yeah, mostly what I do normally, I restarted my Instagram page just because I felt like it was, I realized it was, I made my regular page, like at first it was just one page, but I noticed my students were coming in and taking screenshots of like things of like me hanging out at a family party. So I made that private. And I opened up a second Instagram page called Jeffro Kilpatrick Art. I guess I could type that in right here.
Yeah, type that in so we can, and we'll put that on our website too, links to your Facebook page and Instagram.
Yeah, and basically all my stuff online, my Twitter, which is Jeffro Killer, but it all just feeds through that, Instagram. So even now my Facebook art page, which is Jeffro Kilpatrick Art with spaces, that's been around for a good 10 years or more, but you can go and see a backlog of my stuff if you look through the albums. But everything just gets, you got to change and give information out depending on what people are using, you know what I mean? So I try to acclimate best I can. I mean, you won't see me doing TikToks or anything, but I just use the Instagram because I can use it to show my work. But that's my Instagram right there. And what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, there wasn't a second question, but we had another comment, and it was from Kelly B. It said, what an amazing and moving story about the effect of your early experience working with kids and how your Buddhist friend opened that up to you.
Yeah, I do miss him. I mean, I wouldn't, it changed the whole trajectory of my life. For several years, I was working for like $8 an hour. And, I thought for some reason my college degree was going to, have me walk into and I did work in offices after that, but I don't know. When I look back, that's some of the best times in my life. And the Cartoon Society's done a lot with the Crisis Center because I just wouldn't take no for an answer. I thought people maybe could feel the same way I did. And when you see these kids, I mean, but if it wasn't for Doug and it wasn't for the Crisis Center, I would not be teaching today. I wouldn't have gone back to school for my master's. I wouldn't be getting my certification. And I certainly wouldn't be teaching at Memphis Street Academy, which is the best job I ever had. And those kids are my heroes, and I can't wait to get back to the classroom with them.
Awesome. And we had another question from Janine. It's any advice for artists who are just starting out and looking to make money with their talent?
Some young artists, I spoke recently to my college roommate's class in Easton, and we talked about this. And me, myself, the way I am, I have a hard time. I've done stuff just for money before. And to me, it's the hardest work to finish. If it's something that's out of your style range and you have to compromise, I would say look for ways to make money that suit what you do. So, a lot of people could work for hire, but anytime I was just doing it for money, I really didn't feel good about the work and I didn't feel good about myself. And, with the economy the way it is, I don't know what's out there right now, to be honest. I focus most of my time on teaching. I don't do a heck of a whole lot of freelance anymore, unless it literally comes my way because people are looking for my work. But I'm older now. I'm 45 years old. But I would say don't compromise too much. Like look for avenues that suit what you like to do, because there's nothing more grueling than having to grind out a job of finishing something you don't hate. That you hate and don't like what it looks like at the end. So I mean, there's so many avenues out there, and between like young people, I think have a leg up with technology. And I would just say, go after things you love.
Great advice. Thanks, Jeff. And 2 more comments saying from Claudia, thank you so much. Your work is very unique and inspiring. And from Carrie, your love for the city is evident. Thank you for sharing. And Janine also said, thank you so much for sharing and talking and your advice.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Can I show off that comic now? Is that okay? People want to hang around for a few minutes?
Yeah, we would love that.
All right, good. And I'll put it in context too. I'll explain it. Just give me 1 second. Let me pull it up here. Okay, here we are. All right. Thanks for your patience. And can you see my Chrome page here?
Yes, we can.
And is that all that's up, or am I showing my whole screen?
You're showing your whole screen right now. But yeah, if you make it bigger, I think it should be okay. Yeah.
There you go. All right. So I was saying earlier, I've been drawing this deep sea diver for years, usually for like art show things. And last year, just as kind of an example for my students at the academy, it's a comics class I was running, I started doing a kind of an Ashcan book, which Ashcan's like a small photocopied comic, because I was showing them how to do like DIY comic stuff. And it turned into a much bigger project than I ever thought. I've never made comics like this before. Normally when I do comics, I write a story, I do little tiny thumbnails, I do the character designs, I do all the stuff that other people do. But this time I've decided to literally make it up as I go along for the most part. I'm not writing any page ahead of time. And it leads to things not always being the cleanest or my best work, but it was really about Look, you heard me mention a few people that passed away in the past few years, and my nephew, my cousin, really close people to me. So it's been a struggle. I mean, just getting out of bed or even getting back into the studio. I mean, I have my cousin Sean's work all over here, and it's hard. It's hard getting by without him. It was definitely hard making art, but this was about moving through my grief, through metaphor and comics and stuff. So I've been using this character because of I think about like the heavy feet and how hard it is to walk in this suit and just the heaviness of life. And I've just been making it up as I go along. So these are the first few pages. And it also incorporates some stuff about my mother here. Years ago, I was doing a comic about her illness. She'd passed away of COPD, and she had a breathing machine the last, I would say, 5 years or so of her life. But I was making connections between the air hose of the diver's suit to the kind of oxygen tube that used to run through my house when I was young, and talk about my mother, because I think that was the heaviest grief I probably ever will feel in my life. But so these are the first few pages, but it digs into things I have that toy, this deep sea diver toy, somewhere in my studio. He's put away now, but that was my favorite toy when I was a kid, and I realized maybe that's also where this fascination with this character came from. Down the bottom here, you see this transistor radio. My friend Raj gave that to me, and I kind of have that as use music as a character to argue or to discuss things with the diver, who's usually alone. But it is kind of a surreal comic. It's not meant to be taken as any kind of superhero story or anything. But he gets dragged back into the ocean, down to the bottom of the ocean, by an octopus, who does turn up later in the story again. But the first place he lands is in a cemetery, which has a lot of the names of my family who passed. And then these characters are kind of representing friends of mine. They're like metaphorical versions of close friends who helped me out. Do I need to slow down, or is this okay? I'm going at this pace.
I think if you go back to the last one for a second so we can read the bottom, that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, my friend Mike and I go fishing at the Delaware River still, back on those piers in Fishtown. So, the one catfish character is him. And I've always been fascinated with this coelacanth because it's a living fossil. It hasn't evolved in something like 400 million years. But I read a book about this called A Fish Called in Time years ago, and it didn't evolve because it walks along the bottom of the river. I mean, not river, ocean, sorry, and has these big plates for scales. And it also has lungs and gills. And a lot of people think it may be the missing link between fish and humans, because it's the fins on the bottom move the way that our arms and legs work. Like if your right arm goes forward, your left leg goes forward, and that's how we propel ourselves. And the reason this thing's been able to survive as long as it has, the bottom of the ocean, and not really change much, is because it's just existed down there. It's this living fossil. But they do think that possibly this creature had kind of somewhere in the evolutionary chain had crawled up on land, and that's kind of where any biped has stemmed from. That's a theory. I mean, I like that theory. And the barrel-eye fish, these are actually its eyes in here, and these are nostrils, but it looks through the top of its head. The top of its head is transparent. A lot of these really bottom of the ocean things I'm fascinated with, just because they, like for instance, like a coelacanth can't live in captivity. They bring it up. Sometimes, one of them will get caught, but it won't survive anywhere near the surface because it doesn't have enough pressure pushing on it. But it's a fascinating fish. But he's kind of taking advice from these fish. And I call them the old gods, but they're really just my friends, close friends. But really, I mean, I don't know what this comic's going to become now. after the quarantine, and it's kind of shifting, wherever my feelings are going. There are probably going to be some anxieties weaved into it because of what we're all going through these past 3 months. Sometimes I take books. So this background here is a combination of imagery. I have this one coffee table book called Lost Europe. I was buying cheap coffee table books for a while for reference on, science things or railroads or whatever. But some of these are Fishtown houses and some of them are from this book called Lost Europe. I like to weave things like that. And my buildings always try to make them look a little organic, especially when I'm doing cartoons. Well, here he is. He lost his radio now. The radio will pop up again. During that, I talked about that homelessness charity show. Well, we did a few of those, but it's also where I met Fergie. You guys know Fergie from Fergie's Pub? And I just really like that guy. He gives me he lifts my spirits. He always puts me in a good mood. So I have him in my comic as a bartender, and I use his bar as my little setting for the scene. And probably like that Who Wants Donuts. I really did cram as much as I could into this bar scene. Little Creature from the Black Lagoon reference. I love that movie. But he talks about how even just drinking don't really bring him any peace. It doesn't work either. So, and this is a junkyard where these little mermaid kids are kind of teasing him. And I skip a few pages between there and here, but this is where I'm going to stop. This is actually 5 pages after the last page you saw. But that's it. That's it in sequence.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jeff. Your illustration, they were beautiful illustrations. You can really see the emotion that you had laced throughout the comic.
Thank you. I mean, I respect comics. Comics is hard work. And people kind of look at it as kid stuff. Well, maybe not anymore with all the movies and stuff coming out, but it's my friends who make comics, it's grueling between the interpreting, the facial expressions, making all the characters look the same, leaving space for your words. And I don't know if it gets the credit it deserves as far as, I feel like it's every bit as challenging as painting or sculpture, but it's just a different format. But it's some of my favorite stuff to study.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any final questions for Jeff, you can feel free to put them in the chat. And thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us and for sharing all of your work with us and for giving us a preview as to what you're working on.
Thank you. And I will definitely check out that graphic novel that Kel B mentioned.
And then there's some comments that I'll share with you. Kelly B said the public library has a graphic novel she mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And then Janine said, wow, thank you. Beautiful comic. And I love the sentiment behind it. And Kelly B wrote, the new work looks amazing. Go after things you love. Great advice. Glad your friend brought you to that karma moment. We are seriously the beneficiaries today. Thank you for continuing to pay it forward, including in the midst of the heaviness of life, as you put it, and our current shared struggles.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm just happy to be here and be a part of this. Could we share the link for giving to Portside in the chat? Just if people do want to make a donation. It really is a great place. I've been involved with the Portside from the beginning. There's a few years where I had to take a break when North Catholic shut down just because my schedule changed, but I'm really glad to be back and part of the Portside family and doing some stuff here again. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll share the link. Yeah, if anybody is able to, if you like today's talk and you want to support Portside's mission so we can continue to empower the young people to keep creating, feel free to make a donation. All of it will go to our scholarship fund so that children can attend and get art.
I'm putting my email address in here too. I don't know if people use email anymore, but if anybody has any questions that we didn't go over or something that comes to you later, feel free to drop me a line.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, man, you're always at the top of my list. You're a wonderful pillar of our community, and we appreciate you sharing your talents with us. We really do.
It's just nice to be, it's nice to be talking to people. Thank you.
Yeah. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And for those of you, I'm going to reshare the link because it looks like there we go. There's his email. Yes, thank you, everyone. And feel free to email Jeff with any questions. And feel free to join us for future Artists at Lunch series. We'll be doing this bi-weekly. So stay tuned and have a great day.
Yep. You'll stay well.